It's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the eTrailer trailer hitch receiver on a 2021 Ford Transit T250. Transit vans are great for a number of different things, whether they're a work vehicle or you're doing the van life, but really, no matter what, they're pretty capable vehicles when it comes to towing, and part of that means that you probably need a hitch to accomplish that. And the eTrailer does a fine job of giving you some solid weight capacities and allows you to be able to tow or put whatever accessories you want on your Transit. Now this one is a 2" by 2" receiver tube opening, and that's really nice because it's kind of this standard size for a lot of different accessories. So whether you're looking at ball mounts, bike racks, cargo carriers, whatever it may be, tons of options are going to be available. And the hitch does not come with a pin and clip. A lot of times your accessories will have them included, but if you want to pick one up, a locking one, those are really nice. If you plan on leaving your accessories in place, you're going to want a 5/8 pin and clip. That's going to keep all your accessories in place. We also, you'll see this is an exposed cross tube. That simply means that you're going to see a good majority of the hitch hanging down, but the way that the bumper sits on this, it's pretty well hidden, and this is a vehicle that really the aesthetics of a hitch, I don't think it matters too much. The usability far outweighs the take away from the look. So if you plan on pulling a trailer, you do have a plate style safety chain loop. It's nice and open. You could put a standard S hook with no problems. Even larger clevis styles will go on here. And as far as weight capacities, this is pretty heavy duty. So coming out the gate, a gross trailer weight rating of 6,000 pounds is going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded. So that's pretty solid. You also have a tongue weight rating of 900 pounds, which is the downward pressure that's put on the receiver tube opening. So that's mostly your bike racks and cargo carriers, things that are suspended that are going to put weight on the hitch. And with 900 pounds, you can load up a cargo carrier or a 4-bike bike rack, and I don't worry that you're going to overload it. Now this can be used with a weight distribution hitch, and it's going to bump up the numbers even more. So with a weight distribution hitch, you're going to get 8,000 pounds for that gross trailer weight rating. Tongue weight rating stays the same at 900 pounds. But it's important to check the vehicle's owner's manual to see what it's capable of towing, and then compare that with the hitch as well as any of the components you'll be using. Take the lowest number so you stay safe. I like the way that this sits. It is a little bit further recessed on the bumper, which is nice. You're not going to hit your knees or anything like that on it, but it does sit a little bit further recessed. So when looking at ball mounts or accessories, you might want one that's going to come out a little bit further. So from the center of our hitch pin hole to the furthest point of our bumper, it's about 4.5 inches. So that's something to keep in mind when choosing those accessories. A lot of your folding accessories, they're going to stow in a vertical position. Now, just keep in mind, you're probably not going to be able to open up your doors until you fold them down, but I do think you shouldn't have any issues with being able to fold those. As far as your ground clearance goes, this one from the top of the receiver tube opening to the ground is going to be 16 inches. Pretty good ground clearance overall. Most importantly, though, if you're picking up a ball mount, you're going to use that measurement to determine the rise or drop necessary for your ball mount. So you can measure the coupler of your trailer, compare that with the 16 inches, and that should give you the rise or drop necessary. Now, as far as the installation goes on this hitch, it's actually pretty easy. It's pretty open to be able to get everything in place. The only thing that's a little bit different than most hitches is you're going to be making your own threads using the self-tapping screws included in the kit. You may also want to pick up a tap if you want to use that, but the bolts will tap those holes to create the threads, and you should be able to knock this out fairly easily. You won't really have to use a jack or raise this up. You could probably do this in your driveway or garage. I would give yourself maybe 30 minutes, but it shouldn't take too long, and I'll walk you through all the steps to make sure you get it installed. So let's take a look at that. Now the first step, you may or may not have a factory tow hook. We do want to remove this as it's going to be, the spots where we bolt up our hitch are going to be located underneath the tow hook that we have. So to get that removed, I'm going to use a 15mm socket and a ratchet. And it may be a little tight, but once you kind of get it moving, it's not too bad. So we'll get these both removed. Now these might fight you a little bit, and the reason being is when you take these off, they have almost a rotary or a triangle shape, and that's because these are self-tapping threads. So those spots from the factory are just open, and when they put these in, that'll start to make the threads. And that's going to be key because we're going to be doing the same thing to get our hitch bolted up. Included in our kit is going to be 4 new self-tapping screws, and Where we had our tow hook, if you had yours, that one's kind of already pre-threaded. But a lot of times you probably noticed if you had to take yours off, it can build up with corrosion. So I recommend if you're either using the hole that's already been threaded, spray a little bit of penetrating oil in there. It'll help that kind of clean it out a little bit so these go in easier. And also, if you go back a little bit, or I guess towards the front of the vehicle, this opening here is going to be a spot that we're going to be self-tapping this in. So I'm going to spray that down a little bit as well, and we'll get the other side. And when it comes to making our threads, there's two different ways to do this. It really depends on the tools that you have. You can just use the bolt and it'll find its own threads as you do it. You'll be using a 15mm socket, and you just want this as perpendicular as possible. So really trying to make sure that this stays nice and straight to create clean threads is going to be key. If you have a tap, that's my preferred method. It really makes a nice clean cut there for our threads to go in. And if you're using a thread, or a tap, we're going to be using an M12 by 1.75 to accomplish that. So similar concept as running the bolt in. You're just going to make sure that it's nice and squared up. And then just take your time making these threads. And you may have some metal shavings coming down, so make sure you're not completely under it. Maybe have some safety glasses ready. And you really only need to go about halfway up the thread of the bolt if you're using that. And same thing with the tap. The main thing is we can pass that up, bring it back out, and we know that we have threads made for our bolts. And it is going to give you resistance. You're obviously cutting new metal, so it will fight you a little bit, and then generally once you kind of get it passed through, it should go up fairly easy. But if you're struggling with it, just take your time here. And I'll just repeat on the other side. And this method here, I'm using just a socket and a ratchet. Push up on it, make sure again it's nice and square, but keeping pressure on that's going to help drive it up a little bit until you get it started. And then we'll run this in, make sure we have our threads made, and then take them back out. You're going to want to grab your carriage bolt and a spacer block, and they say to use a pull wire to get this in place. You really don't need to. Sometimes it is nice to have this attached to the end of the carriage bolt to hold this in place as you raise the hitch up. So what I'm going to do is just put the carriage bolt in the spacer block, and then on the end of this little frame rail, we'll just drop this into place. You should be able to reach it a little far, but if you can get that to drop in, that makes it super easy. I am going to thread this on just so as I raise the hitch up, it won't push it up. So I'll show you the other method of actually using the pull wire to make it a little bit easier if you want. If you use the pull wire, you're just going to take the coiled end, feed it through the hole on the frame, slide this back, and then you can thread on your spacer block and carriage bolt. And then we'll just pull this through until we get that carriage bolt to drop in. And at this point, that's going to become our first mounting point of our hitch. So we'll grab our serrated flange nuts, and you might want to grab an extra set of hands to be able to raise this up. We'll get that hardware started, and it'll make it a lot easier to get these in place. You can do this by yourself. You could use a floor jack or something along those lines. It's not too bad, but it definitely helps to have that extra set of hands. So feed your pull wire through the rear hole there. And then what you can do is use the hitch to kind of hold that in place by just putting pressure and pulling it back so it's holding on to those threads. And then once you're just kind of holding this up, you pull that pull wire off, serrated flange nut. You can get that started on both sides. It's a little tighter on the passenger side because of the exhaust, but similar concept. And once those are started, the hitch is going to support itself. We can go ahead and grab our we had our self-tapping screws. We'll grab those and get those threaded in. You want to raise that hitch up to where it's aligned with those holes that we use the tap or the self-tapping screws. And just take your time to get this drawn in. And then we'll just snug all of these down. Now we're going to come back with a torque wrench, so you don't have to get crazy here. The main thing is getting them all in place. So you should have a total of the 2 bolts on each side and then 1 nut on each side. Now with all of our hardware tightened down, it's time to grab our torque wrench and torque down the hardware. You're going to find those torque settings in the instruction manual. And there are going to be different. So our carriage bolts versus our self-tapping screws are going to have 2 different torque settings, so make sure you're adjusting accordingly. A 1/2-inch torque wrench is going to be key as far as getting those torque settings. So on our carriage bolts, we'll start with that. It's going to be a 3/4 inch socket to accomplish this. And torque wrench is going to be really important because obviously it'll make sure that it's tight enough for the hitch to stay on for the lifespan, but also not too tight, especially when it comes to those new threads we made. If you overdo it, you can damage the hardware or those threads made. So the torque wrench makes sure that we get it dialed in perfectly. So I'll get my other side done, and then I'll swap back to my 15mm and get these torqued down with that other torque setting. Something else that you're going to want to take in consideration or do before really getting everything tightened down is these are slotted to allow for a little bit of wiggle room back and forth. I would make sure that this is nice and centered up. You can use this gap on the door. You just don't want to have your hitch off center, and now's the time to fix that. So center it up as much as possible before torquing and tightening everything down. Now with all of our hardware torqued down, we've officially installed our hitch. The only thing that's left to do is load up our accessories and hit the road. And that was a look and installation of the eTrailer, a trailer hitch receiver on a 2021 Ford Transit T250.